You need a kidney, not want, need. Your doctor used the word urgent. The national transplant list has 100,000 names on it. Yours is somewhere in the middle. Average wait time is 5 years. You don't have 5 years. Dialysis is keeping you alive, but just barely. So someone hands you a number, a contact, a guy who knows a guy. Welcome to the black market. Not the one selling fake handbags and bootleg sneakers, the one selling actual human organs out of clinics with no paperwork. The black market isn't a place, there's no building. Think of it as a shadow economy running quietly underneath the legal one. No storefront, no address, no hours of operation. It exists wherever laws create a gap between what people desperately need and what they can legally get. Drugs, weapons, counterfeit currency, stolen goods, everything moves through the same basic structure. A seller, a buyer, and a middleman collecting a cut from both sides. The middleman is always there. That's the whole architecture. Cut him out and the network falls apart. He's the reason any of it functions at all. He knows the surgeons. He knows the desperate. He connects them and disappears before anyone asks questions. But organs are complicated in ways most black market goods aren't. A kidney has to match. Blood type, tissue compatibility, organ size. You can't swap one in like a car battery. The logistics push costs up fast. A kidney on the black market runs anywhere from $15,000 to $200,000 depending on where in the world the transaction happens. In the Philippines, it trends toward the low end. In Western Europe or the United States, the number climbs significantly. The seller almost never sees most of that money. The broker takes the largest share, the surgeon collects a fee. The hospital administrator who doesn't look too closely at the intake forms takes something. By the time it reaches the person who actually gave up the organ, they might walk away with $5,000, sometimes less, often considerably less, the equivalent of a moderately decent used car in exchange for a body part you can never get back. So who sells a kidney? Not people doing well. The person on the other end of that transaction is behind on a debt they can't repay. Their crop failed. The landlord wants rent by Friday and there's nothing in the account. There are exceptions. Iran is the only country on earth where selling a kidney is fully legal and regulated by the government. Donors receive around $4,600 from the state, plus additional negotiated compensation from the recipient. The waiting list in Iran is essentially zero because of this. Everywhere else, it's a criminal transaction, which means everywhere else the seller has no legal protection at all, no enforceable contract, no recourse if the surgeon botches the removal, no guaranteed follow-up care, no one to call if something goes wrong 3 weeks later. They go in, they come out missing one kidney and carrying whatever cash was promised. If the broker pockets half and stops answering, what are they going to do? Report it to the police and explain the whole arrangement. That's not an option, and nobody warns you about the recovery part. A legitimate kidney donation at a real hospital involves weeks of monitored post-operative care, blood work, nutritional screening, regular check-ins with a medical team. The black market version is a clinic that may or may not have fully sterile equipment. Surgery happens. You wake up in a room that smells like concrete and antiseptic and low-grade anxiety. Someone hands you an envelope. You're told to rest for 2 days, keep the incision clean, take these pills, then you're out. The door's behind you. Infection rates among black market donors run significantly higher than rates in legal donation programs. Some lose partial function in the remaining kidney within a decade. Some develop complications that a standard post-operative appointment would have caught. Nobody tracks these outcomes cleanly because everyone involved has strong incentives not to be found. The buyers aren't doing much better on their end. You paid $150,000 for a kidney from a stranger in a country you've never visited. The transplant was performed by a surgeon whose actual credentials you couldn't verify even if you tried. The organ might not be a perfect match. The procedure might not have gone cleanly. You fly home. Your regular doctors are furious. They can't pull surgical records because there aren't any. They don't know what medications were used during the procedure. They don't know if complications arose on the table. The donor's full medical history is unavailable because it was never collected. You tell them what you can remember. They piece together the rest. Sometimes the organ functions fine for years. Sometimes the body rejects it anyway, and you're back at the start, except now you're $150,000 short, and your name is still on the same waiting list. The complications from black market transplants ripple outward for years. Recipients develop chronic kidney disease at higher rates than those who receive organs through legitimate channels. Some require retransplantation within a decade because the first organ failed prematurely. Others contract infections from unsterilized surgical equipment or contaminated blood products used during the procedure. The original health crisis that made them desperate for a kidney becomes compounded by new medical problems that could have been prevented. Donors face their own cascade of consequences. They return home to their impoverished communities with surgical scars and a single functional kidney, often without antibiotics or pain management. Their employers might not hold their jobs during the recovery period. They might never fully regain their physical capacity for the labor that was their only income. The global black market for organs is estimated at around $1.7 billion per year. That number is almost certainly an undercount because this market doesn't file annual reports. The World Health Organization estimates roughly 10,000 illegal organ transplants occur each year worldwide. That's approximately 1 per hour every hour around the clock. Most involve kidneys because you have 2 and can technically survive on 1. Livers come next because a partial section can be removed and regenerate over time. Hearts don't appear on this market. The infrastructure required to keep a heart viable long enough to transport and transplant makes it essentially impossible outside legitimate medical channels. Some things are too logistically demanding even for organized crime. The networks running this trade aren't amateur operations. They're structured and durable. Brokers operate out of Pakistan, India, Egypt, Kosovo, Moldova, and China, among other places. Some of these networks have been running for decades without significant interruption. The Kosovo case in the early 2000s involved a clinic called Medicus operating on the outskirts of Pristina. Patients flew in from Israel, Germany, Canada, and Poland. Donors were recruited from Moldova and Kazakhstan with promises of $15,000 that most never actually received in full. Interpol and Eurojust dismantled the operation in 2008. Convictions finally came down in 2013. The network had been functioning for years before investigators got close enough to see it clearly. Plenty of other networks didn't get found. The Medicus case exposed the infrastructure, but thousands of smaller operations continued functioning with less visibility. Organs move through commercial airlines in coolers labeled as medical equipment. Border inspectors aren't trained to spot them. Customs declarations list organs as tissue samples. Money flows back through legitimate banking channels disguised as consultation fees or medical tourism payments. The systems have become sophisticated enough that a single transplant pipeline might operate across 4 continents with multiple layers of insulation between each component. The laws haven't kept pace with any of this. In most countries, selling an organ is illegal, but buying one exists in a gray zone that makes prosecution genuinely difficult. The patient who traveled abroad for a transplant says they didn't know the full details. The surgeon back home managing their recovery says the same thing. The money moved through medical billing channels that don't look criminal from the outside. Prosecutions are rare, convictions are rarer still. Meanwhile, the waiting list grows every year. Around 13 Americans die each day waiting for an organ that never comes. That number is why the market exists at all. The gap between supply and demand is enormous and has been for decades. The broker fills it. That's the whole business model. You're still on the list, 5 years, maybe 4 now. Dialysis 3 times a week, 4 hours a session. You do the math on what that costs in time alone, not counting the rest. Someone texts you the number again.